CEO shocked when Janitor saves him from masked men with her secret kung fu skills. The office was unusually quiet that night. The tall glass windows of Maxwell Industries reflected the faint glow of the city lights. Inside, Richard Maxwell, the CEO himself, sat behind his desk, papers scattered everywhere. Another night of signing deals while everyone else is at home, Richard muttered under his breath, rubbing his tired eyes. He loosened his tie and leaned back in his leather chair. Down the hall, Angela Carter, the janitor, pushed her cleaning cart slowly. She wore her usual blue uniform, hair tied back in a simple bun. Most people never noticed her, except for a polite nod or a quick good night. But tonight, she noticed something strange, footsteps that didn't belong. Suddenly, the glass door to Richard's office slammed open. 3 masked men rushed in, dressed in black, knives glinting under the dim lights. "Don't move," one of them barked, pointing at Richard. Richard froze, his hands half raised. "Well, what do you want? Money? Take whatever you need." The leader snarled. "We're not here for your money, Mr. Maxwell. You've made enemies." Richard's heart pounded. He could barely breathe. From the corner of the hall, Angela stopped, gripping the mop handle tightly. Her eyes narrowed. She had seen danger before, but this was different. This was survival. She dropped the mop quietly and stepped closer. "Leave him alone," Angela's voice cut through the tension. The men turned sharply. "Who the hell are you?" one of them sneered. Richard blinked, confused. "Angela? What are you doing?" "Stay back, call security." But Angela didn't move. She took a slow breath, her stance shifting, her body lowering slightly like someone who had done this before. "You don't want to do this," she warned softly. The men laughed. "Oh, look at this super janitor," one mocked, taking a step toward her. In a flash, Angela grabbed the handle of her mop, swung it like a staff, and struck his wrist with a sharp crack. The knife clattered to the floor. The other 2 lunged forward, but Angela moved with lightning precision, ducking, spinning, striking. Her movements weren't wild, they were controlled, sharp, like water flowing but with deadly force. Richard's jaw dropped. What the hell? For a moment, the office became a blur of fists, feet, and gasps. Papers flew, chairs toppled, glass shattered. Angela's eyes burned with a hidden fire, her body moving with a rhythm that no ordinary janitor should know. Finally, with a last sweeping kick, the last masked man hit the ground groaning. Angela stood tall, breathing steadily, not a trace of fear in her eyes. Richard stumbled forward, still shaken. "Angela, how did you?" His voice cracked. She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. For the first time, Richard saw her not as the quiet janitor who mopped his floors, but as someone entirely different. "My father was a kung fu master," she said quietly, almost like a confession. "I grew up in a remote part of China. He taught me everything. After my parents died in an accident, I came here to live with my uncle. Cleaning floors was the only job I could get." Richard's throat tightened. He had never once thought about Angela's story, her past, her life. To him, she was just the woman with the mop. But now, standing in the wreckage of his office, she looked like someone out of a legend. The sound of sirens began to echo faintly in the distance. Richard's voice trembled as he whispered, "Angela? I don't even know what to say." Angela glanced at the broken window, the city lights spilling in. Her eyes softened, but her jaw stayed firm. "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Maxwell," she said. "This isn't over. Men like them, they don't act alone." Richard swallowed hard, suddenly realizing that his world was far more dangerous, and that his quiet janitor carried secrets deeper than he ever imagined. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue lights bouncing against the glass tower outside. Richard staggered toward the shattered window, his chest heaving. His once spotless, pristine office now looked like a war zone, broken furniture, blood on the carpet, papers scattered like fallen snow. Angela stood still, her breathing calm. She bent down, picked up the fallen knife, and handed it to Richard. "Keep it down," she whispered. "Don't tell the cops everything." Richard blinked, startled. "What? Why not? They need to know what just happened here, about you, about them." Angela shook her head. "If you tell them about me, it'll bring more trouble than you can imagine. These men, they're not just thugs. Someone sent them." Her eyes, sharp and unflinching, locked on his. Richard felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Who?" he asked quietly. Angela hesitated. For a brief second, her tough exterior cracked, and a shadow of pain flickered across her face. "Let's just say, I've seen this kind of work before." Before Richard could ask again, the office door swung open. 2 police officers rushed in, guns raised. "Freeze! Hands where we can see them." Richard quickly raised his hands. "It's okay. It's okay. I'm Richard Maxwell, this is my office." They broke in. He glanced at Angela, his words catching in his throat. She saved me. The cops scanned the room, cuffed the groaning intruders, and began radioing in backup. Angela quietly stepped back, her face calm, like a shadow trying to fade into the background. But Richard wasn't about to let her disappear again. He walked over, lowering his voice. Angela, listen to me. You can't just mop floors after this. You saved my life. She sighed, almost impatiently. I don't need recognition, Mr. Maxwell. I just need to keep working and stay invisible. That's how I've survived. Richard frowned. For the first time in years, the confident CEO felt powerless. He had built empires, crushed competitors, signed billion-dollar deals, yet here was a woman who swept his halls at night, and she had just done what all his money and security couldn't. He studied her. You've been hiding all this time, he said softly. Why? Angela's eyes darkened. She glanced at the cuffed men on the floor, then back at Richard. Because the last time I didn't hide, people I loved died. Richard's throat tightened. He didn't push further. As the officers led the masked men away, Richard pulled out his phone and quickly called his head of security. Get up here. Now. And double the patrol. When he hung up, he turned to Angela. You're not going back to scrubbing floors tomorrow. You're staying close to me. If these men were sent for me, then I need someone like you at my side. Angela's lips pressed into a thin line. And if they weren't sent for you? Richard froze. The thought hadn't crossed his mind. He studied her face, the calm, the strength, the hidden pain. Then, he said carefully, we both have enemies. For the first time, Angela allowed a small, bittersweet smile. Now you're starting to understand. The office fell silent again, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. The city below glowed like nothing had happened, but Richard knew everything had changed. Angela Carter wasn't just a janitor anymore. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of the city, someone dangerous had just realized she was no longer invisible. The next morning, Richard didn't go home. He barely slept in his office chair, replaying the night's events in his head. The image of Angela moving like a storm, dismantling 3 armed men with nothing but instinct and skill, it haunted him. By sunrise, he made a decision. When Angela walked in quietly, pushing her cleaning cart like nothing had happened, Richard stood up immediately. Angela, he said firmly. She stopped, her face calm. Mr. Maxwell. You should rest. Last night? No, Richard interrupted. Last night was a warning. And you're the only reason I'm still alive. Angela lowered her eyes, her tone steady. I told you. I'm not a hero. I just do what I have to do. Richard studied her for a moment. That's exactly why I need you. Stay close to me, Angela. Not as a janitor. As my protector. Angela's head tilted slightly, her expression unreadable. You don't even know what you're asking for. Men like that, they don't stop. Whoever sent them won't stop. Do you really want me that close when the next attack comes? Richard hesitated. For the first time in his career, he felt stripped of control. But deep inside, he knew he couldn't face whatever this was without her. Yes, he said quietly. I trust you. Angela turned away for a moment, staring out the window at the sprawling city. Her voice softened. When I was a little girl, my father used to say, to fight is not just to win, it's to protect what matters. He lived by that, until the day that old bus tumbled off a bridge and took him and my mother away. Her words hung heavy in the air. Richard didn't know what to say. Finally, Angela turned back, her eyes sharp again. Fine. I'll stay close. But you have to understand something, this isn't about business anymore. This is about survival. Before Richard could answer, the office door burst open. His head of security, David Ross, a broad-shouldered man in a suit, stormed in with 2 guards. Sir, we reviewed the cameras. Those men, they bypassed every layer of security. Someone fed them the building codes. Richard's stomach dropped. An inside job? David nodded grimly. Yes. Someone on your payroll. Maybe higher. Angela's gaze hardened. She stepped forward. Then they'll try again. And they won't stop until whoever's behind this gets what they want. David frowned, eyeing her suspiciously. Who the hell are you supposed to be? Richard's jaw clenched. He glanced at Angela, then back at David. She's the reason I'm alive right now. That's all you need to know. Angela, however, didn't flinch under David's stare. She simply crossed her arms. If your security failed once, it'll fail again. You'd better decide quickly if you want me on your side, or out of your way. The room fell into tense silence. Richard felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. He had always trusted numbers, contracts, and money. But now, his survival depended on a janitor with a past rooted in shadows he barely understood. And deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. 2 days later, the tension inside Maxwell Industries was unbearable. Extra guards patrolled the lobby, cameras blinked in every corner, and Richard's schedule had been cut in half. Yet, despite the increased security, Richard felt more exposed than ever. He kept glancing at Angela, who now followed him quietly, not as a janitor, but as something far more mysterious. That afternoon, as Richard sat in the boardroom with his executives, a sudden blackout plunged the skyscraper into darkness. Gasps filled the room. The hum of the air conditioning died, replaced by an eerie silence. "Not again," Richard muttered, standing up. Angela was already moving. Her instinct screamed at her, this wasn't a random outage. She slipped a small flashlight from her pocket and swept the beam across the room. "Stay away from the windows," she ordered sharply. The executives froze. Richard blinked at her. "Angela, what is it?" Before he could finish, the sound of shattering glass erupted down the hallway. A sharp, metallic clatter followed, smoke grenades rolling across the marble floor. "Down! Now!" Angela shouted. The room erupted into chaos. Men in black tactical gear stormed the boardroom, their faces hidden, their movements military precise. This wasn't a robbery. This was a hit. One of the executives screamed. Another tried to run, only to be shoved back inside at gunpoint. Richard's pulse thundered in his ears. He ducked behind the long conference table, coughing as smoke filled the air. His eyes darted, searching, where was Angela? Then, out of the haze, she appeared. Moving low, swift, her silhouette cutting through the smoke like a blade. "Get them out alive," she muttered to herself, gripping a chair leg she'd ripped off in one fluid motion. The first attacker lunged at her, but Angela spun, smashing the wooden leg against his arm. The crack of bone echoed. She grabbed his weapon mid-fall, twisting it free, and in the same breath swept another off his feet. Richard's jaw clenched as he watched, heart pounding. She wasn't just fighting, she was dancing with death. Every strike was sharp, efficient, controlled. But one of the masked men barked something in Chinese Mandarin. Angela froze for half a second, her eyes narrowing. Richard caught it. "What did he say?" he shouted, coughing. Angela didn't answer. She threw the chair leg, knocking him unconscious, but her expression darkened. It wasn't random anymore. This was personal. The fight ended as quickly as it began. 3 men lay groaning on the ground, one fled through the broken window with a rope line, vanishing into the city night. Angela stood still, breathing hard, the gun in her hand trembling slightly. Richard slowly rose from behind the table, his face pale. "Angela, what did he say?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, she whispered, "He called me by my father's name." Richard's chest tightened. "Your father? But you said, he's been dead for years." Angela turned toward the broken window, her face shadowed by the smoke and flashing emergency lights. "That's what I thought too. But if they know his name, then the people who hunted us back in China, they found me." The room fell silent. Richard suddenly realized this wasn't just about him, or his company. It was about Angela's past catching up, and whoever was behind these attacks was just getting started. That night, Richard's office was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't peace, it was the calm before another storm. Angela stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the glowing city below. Richard poured himself a drink, though his hands shook as he lifted the glass. Finally, he broke the silence. "Angela, you saved me twice. You didn't have to." "Why?" Angela's eyes softened. For the first time, Richard saw not just the warrior, but the woman beneath, the one who had carried grief for years in silence. "My father taught me that strength means nothing if you don't use it to protect someone," she said quietly. "I couldn't save him. I couldn't save my mother. But maybe," she turned to him, her gaze steady, "maybe I can save you." Richard swallowed hard, guilt rising in his chest. He had spent his life overlooking people like her, treating them as invisible. Yet she was the one keeping him alive. He set the glass down. "Angela, no more hiding. Not for you. Whoever they are, whatever they want, we'll fight them. Together." Angela almost smiled, but it faded as quickly as it came. "You don't know what you're promising, Richard. These people, they don't stop until there's nothing left." He stepped closer, determination in his eyes. "Then they've just made a mistake. They've underestimated us, both of us." Angela studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "All right. But if you stay by my side, your life will never be the same." Richard exhaled slowly. "It already isn't." The two stood in silence, the city lights stretching endlessly before them. Somewhere out there, enemies were moving in shadows, and the war wasn't over. But for the first time, Angela wasn't alone, and neither was Richard. Angela's voice was barely above a whisper as she turned back to the window. "My father once told me, the strongest fighters aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who rise again and again, no matter how many times the world tries to break them. Richard looked at her with newfound respect. Not as a janitor. Not even as just his protector. But as someone who carried scars deeper than his wealth could ever understand. And in that moment, he knew, whatever storm was coming next, he would face it with her. Because sometimes, heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes, they carry mops.